Imagine Paris in the early 1952nd, cobblestone streets glistening after a light rain, golden street lamps casting their glow onto freshly unveiled Dior New Look gowns. Amid this cinematic scene, a tall, poised woman walks in as though the entire city were her stage. Every camera turns instantly. This is Fiona Campbell-Walter, the English aristocrat whose cool, regal aura meets the soft allure of a screen siren. Fiona was more than a Vogue cover girl or Balenciaga's muse. She embodied a moment in fashion history when post-war elegance collided with daring innovation. Yet behind the flashbulbs and $1,000 haute couture gowns lay an unexpected story. A journey from the safety of noble lineage into the volatile heart of the fashion industry, a place where glittering praise was always shadowed by whispered criticism. Her life reads like a chapter from the world that 90-second supermodels would later inherit, where beauty and fame can be as intoxicating as they are dangerous, a precursor to what the dark side of fashion would reveal decades later. Fiona's path was not merely about dressing for the runway, it was about defying the life she was born into, stepping into one she had been warned to avoid. This is the story of a woman who was both a princess of the catwalk and a rebel in her own life. And like all legends, her brilliance would one day meet the shadows waiting at the end of the runway. Fiona Campbell-Walter was born in 1932 Auckland, New Zealand, but held British nationality and grew up within the rarefied world of the aristocracy. Her father, Colonel Harold Hume Campbell-Walter, was a distinguished officer in the British Army. Her mother, Lady Audrey Campbell-Walter, came from an old, prestigious family with deep ties to royalty. Fiona's childhood unfolded in grand houses filled with sunlight, the rhythmic clatter of horses' hooves on gravel driveways, and formal tea parties under the shade of centuries-old oak trees. Her world was a perfectly composed portrait of wealth and tradition: silk dresses tailored in Paris, glittering ballroom evenings, leather-bound books lined up neatly in the family library. But along with this luxury came strict rules. From an early age, Fiona was taught to walk with a straight back, speak with precision, and above all maintain the honor of the family. A single frown from her mother, or the stern glance of her father, could silence her for hours. Yet beneath this rigid etiquette, Fiona nurtured a fierce curiosity about the outside world. At 13, she secretly pored over French fashion magazines her mother had forbidden, captivated by the daring cuts of Dior and the wild artistry of Balenciaga. In her young eyes, that world seemed like a dazzling galaxy, far from the suffocating reality of diplomatic dinners and polite small talk. When World War II erupted, the family left New Zealand for England. The austerity of post-war London, with its muted shop windows and rationing, only deepened Fiona's hunger for color and light. At the elite girls' boarding school she attended, she stood apart, her 5'20" frame and natural elegance making her instantly noticeable. But it wasn't just her height or beauty. It was the way her blue eyes carried both distance and an unspoken longing. While her classmates dreamt of marrying wealthy gentlemen, Fiona sketched dresses, practiced walking as if on a runway, and imagined herself in the fashion capitals of Europe. But in her family's eyes, modeling was frivolous if not shameful. Her mother famously said, "A Campbell-Walter does not stand in front of crowds to sell clothes." These words built an invisible wall between Fiona and her true ambition. She often felt like a rare bird in a gilded cage, well-fed, well-kept, but unable to fly. In her late teens, Fiona began to push against the limits. She took on small photo shoots for local magazines under a pseudonym, carefully hiding this from her parents. Each time she saw her own image in glossy print, her heart raced not from vanity, but from the rare feeling of living as her true self. She knew the secret would eventually come out, but something inside her refused to stop. It was as if fate itself was steering her toward a life no one in her family had ever envisioned. In 1950, when Fiona was just 18, London was still shaking off the dust of war. The city, gray with coal smoke, occasionally came alive with the sparkle of new fashion shows. One crisp autumn afternoon, Fiona accompanied a friend to a small art event in Mayfair. She wore a simple wool dress, her hair loosely pinned, no dramatic makeup yet. It was precisely this understated elegance that made her stand out. That was when John French, one of London's most celebrated fashion photographers, noticed her. He would later recall, "She stood there as though the whole room had been built to frame her." French approached and invited Fiona to a test shoot. The offer filled her with both excitement and dread. She knew that if her family discovered this, it would end before it began. But curiosity and her deep yearning for the world she had always dreamed of won out. The shoot took place in French's modest studio, sunlight streaming through a wide window. Fiona needed little direction, the tilt of her chin, the placement of her hand, and most of all, that distant, glacial gaze froze the room into silence. When the film was developed, French knew he had found a face that could redefine post-war beauty standards. Those first photographs soon found their way to the editors at Vogue UK. A phone call followed. Fiona was invited to an official casting. For most young women, this would be the ultimate dream. For Fiona, it was also a direct challenge to her family's authority. When her mother heard, she reacted with outrage, calling the idea disgraceful. Her father stayed silent, but his stern eyes spoke volumes. That night, Fiona lay awake, listening to the rain tapping against her window, wondering if she had the courage to break away from the life mapped out for her. The next morning, she dressed simply, took a small handbag, and left the house without a word. The Vogue casting was like stepping into another world, bolts of exquisite fabric, the click of camera shutters, the faint scent of powder in the air. When her turn came, Fiona didn't overpose, she simply stood, letting her natural poise and aristocratic confidence speak for her. By that same afternoon, the decision was made. Fiona would be the face of Vogue's upcoming winter haute couture spread. Within a week, her image appeared not only in the London edition, but also in the Paris reprint. The fashion world began to murmur, "Who is this aristocratic girl, and why has she stepped onto the runway?" It was the beginning of a journey that, decades later, would echo in the world of 90-second Supermodels, foreshadowing the intoxicating mix of elegance and rebellion and the shadows that would one day be revealed by the dark side of fashion. Within just months of her first Vogue appearance, Fiona Campbell-Walter had become a name every European photographer and designer wanted. Paris, the city she once knew only from magazine pages, now welcomed her as though she were royalty. On her first day in the fashion capital, she was whisked directly to Christian Dior's studio. The couturier, with his famously discerning eye, needed only seconds to recognize what she was, the living embodiment of aristocratic beauty. Fitting sessions with Fiona resembled royal rituals. Draped in the curves of a new-look gown, she would move slowly, shoulders straight, chin slightly lifted, a presence that made the room collectively hold its breath. She didn't just wear the dress, one of Dior's assistants would say. She told the story of the dress. Balenciaga, too, quickly claimed Fiona as one of his muses. Under his lights, she transformed from a refined English lady into the distilled essence of minimalism and power. Her bone structure, cast in gold light, and her glacial blue eyes made her unforgettable. Throughout the early 1952nd, Fiona graced the covers of Vogue Paris, Harper's Bazaar, and Elle. Every photograph radiated the same paradox, aloof yet magnetic, a quality critics dubbed the seductive ice wall. This combination of innate nobility and transformative versatility set her apart from her contemporaries, much in the way 90-second Supermodels would later captivate audiences with their unique blend of personality and mystique. Legendary photographers such as Richard Avedon, Cecil Beaton, and Norman Parkinson sought her out. Beaton famously devoted an entire afternoon to photographing Fiona at a lace-curtained window, remarking, "The light found her before my lens ever did." At Paris and Rome Fashion Weeks, Fiona was the most coveted opening face. When she stepped onto the runway, time seemed to slow. The click of her heels on wooden floors, the whisper of silk, the collective gaze of the audience following her every move. The press crowned her the aristocratic muse. Her success was not just about beauty, it was her flawless professionalism. She never arrived late, never complained about marathon fittings, and maintained her composure even under the blinding glare of hundreds of cameras. Designers entrusted her with their most important collections, confident she would honor the vision. From Parisian salons to Italian palazzos, Fiona became the symbol of a golden age when fashion was still pure artistry. Yet, even at the height of her glory, there were quiet moments when she gazed out of a window, wondering if this truly was the destination she had been searching for, or just another gilded cage. In these moments, the shimmer of haute couture seemed to foreshadow the same bittersweet tension that the dark side of fashion would reveal decades later, a truth that beauty and success always come with their own unspoken costs. In an era when most models bent over backward to please the fashion establishment, Fiona Campbell-Walter stood out for setting her own boundaries. She was not the kind to accept every offer just for another magazine cover or a lucrative contract. Once, a celebrated New York photographer proposed an artistic, semi-nude series. It was the latest trend provocative, headline-grabbing, the kind of move that could catapult a model to instant global fame. Fiona refused without hesitation. "I am a model," she said calmly, "not a product to feed someone's imagination." The decision shocked many, and some peers whispered she had squandered a golden opportunity. But that very refusal became part of her legacy, preserving the image of elegance that could not be bought. Fiona also had the courage to challenge industry norms. While working with Balenciaga, she once suggested altering the presentation style to highlight the intricate handwork of a gown rather than simply pacing the runway in the usual rhythm. At first, the team hesitated, but when the show ended, the press raved about its freshness and refinement. She was equally known for defending her fellow models. During a shoot in Italy, she witnessed a young newcomer being treated disrespectfully. Fiona intervened, demanding the behavior stop, fully aware it might cost her favor with powerful photographers. "If we stay silent today," she told the crew, "tomorrow another girl will endure the same." What set her apart was not only her poise, but also her refusal to let the whirlwind of glamour consume her. While others spent their nights in endless parties, Fiona preferred to go home early, read or write letters to friends. She cultivated a small circle of confidants, Christian Dior and photographer Cecil Beaton, among them who valued her as much for her mind as for her image. This combination of self-respect, artistic discernment, and quiet rebellion made her the proud muse in the eyes of the press. In a sense, she embodied the kind of independence and principle that later generations like 90s Supermodels would also be admired for, even as they navigated the temptations of the dark side of fashion. For Fiona, fashion was an art form, and she participated only in projects she truly believed in. These bold decisions, paired with her unwavering principles, ensured she would be remembered not merely as a face of the 1952nd, but as an icon proof that in a world built on appearances, dignity and conviction are the true measures of class. By the late 1952nd, at the very height of her career, Fiona Campbell-Walter stunned the fashion world by announcing her marriage. Her husband was Baron Hans Heinrich Thyssen-Bornemisza, one of Europe's wealthiest art collectors. The union swept Fiona into an even more opulent realm than fashion itself. Centuries. Old estates in Switzerland and Spain, glittering private parties with royalty, aristocrats, and the elite of the art world. From the outside, it seemed she had achieved the ultimate dream: beauty, fame, influence, and a fortune beyond imagination. Yet this very grandeur marked the beginning of her retreat from the spotlight. As a baroness, Fiona was bound by a rigid social code that contrasted sharply with the freedom modeling had once afforded her. Her presence on runways and magazine covers dwindled. Instead, the public saw her at art galas and charity events, smiling graciously but with a distant glint in her eyes. Friends would later recall that, while she loved her family and children deeply, she often confessed to missing the quickened pulse of Paris and London, when her choices were her own. The marriage lasted over a decade before ending in divorce. Fiona left the aristocratic world behind, but did not return to fashion. Too much time had passed. The industry had shifted. The early 1972 brought new faces, new styles, and her aristocratic Muse image became a relic of another era. Choosing a quieter life in Europe, she rarely appeared in public. Occasionally, the press tried to revisit the woman who once enchanted Dior and Balenciaga, but Fiona usually declined interviews. The rare candid photos showed a silver-haired lady, still straight-backed and elegant, though her gaze was softer, absent the youthful defiance it once carried. Her disappearance from fashion was not marred by scandal or public downfall. It was more like a velvet curtain drawing closed after a luminous play, leaving the audience in silence, haunted by the beauty they had just witnessed. Some said she had walked away from the chance to become a living legend. Others believed she had simply written her own ending, one in which the glare of fame would never consume the real person behind the image. Her story carried the same quiet poignancy found in later tales of 90s supermodels who stepped away at their peak, avoiding the personal tolls often exposed by the dark side of fashion. Fiona's name remains like a lingering note in the memory of those who lived through the golden age of haute couture. Fiona Campbell-Walter was more than a model. She was the embodiment of a time when elegance itself was elevated to an art form. From the luminous covers of Vogue to her commanding presence on the runways of Dior and Balenciaga, she etched her name into the memory of the industry with a rare blend of aristocratic beauty and unshakable principle. What made her different was her instinct to leave the stage at the right moment. She refused to let age, shifting trends, or fleeting fashions define her worth. In a world that always demands more, faster, louder, Fiona chose silence. That silence became part of her allure, making her name more mysterious, more enduring. Today, when we look back at her black and white photographs, we see more than a model, we see a story. The story of a woman who stepped beyond her safe circle, reached the heights, and then closed the brightest chapter of her life on her own terms. Perhaps Fiona never set out to be a legend, yet in the eyes of fashion lovers, she remains the aristocratic muse, an icon of elegance and pride. Her journey foreshadows the narratives of many 90s supermodels, women who walked the fine line between fame and self-preservation, often navigating the hidden costs later revealed by the dark side of fashion. And so the question lingers: if Fiona were to step onto the runway today, would the fashion world be refined enough to welcome such a beauty again?